Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me, your host, Tommy Gilberts, as we sit down and take a behind-the-scenes look into Titan athletics with weekly interviews with coaches and athletes. This is Titan Table Talk. Hello, Titan family, and welcome back inside the Ames Library podcast studio. It is week 5 of Titan Table Talk and homecoming week here on the beautiful campus of Illinois Wesleyan University. Excited to welcome first Coach Norm Eash, coming off a nice shutout victory of the Carthage Firebirds on Saturday. Coach, first time at home finally after being on campus since early August. How'd it feel to be back at Tucci and playing so well against the first two CCIW opponents?
Well, we were really looking forward to get back and play at Tucci Stadium. You know, we've been on the road 2 weeks in a row, or 2 games in a row, I should say. You know, we went to Central, and that was a really long trip, overnight trip, and then we went to Elmhurst, and that was a night game. So those are tough trips because when you play at night, you get back about 12:30, and that makes for a really short weekend. But played really well at Elmhurst. We're excited about that, and we wanted to get our second CCIW win against Carthage, and we did that. But it was extra because of the dedication of the scoreboard and just coming home for the first time for the season. So I thought we came out and played with a lot of energy right off the bat, put some points on the board, and our defense did a great job of really shutting down Carthage.
So I did want to talk a little bit about the defense, in particular rush defense. Clearly the Firebirds offense has had its struggles early in the year, not scored in 2 ball games coming in, but it was St. John's and North Central, really tough opponents, about as tough as you're going to find in the region. But holding them to 32 rush yards, and especially that's going to happen to some degree when you're up, but 4 rushing yards in the first half for the Firebirds. I mean, it's complete lockdown by the front 7 right there.
Well, we're really excited to get that shutout, and we have a very experienced defense. I mean, we have players that have been starting for at least 3 and maybe 4 years. So we have a lot of confidence in our defense. I think the key was for us to control things up front. I think we did that, which allows you to do a lot of different things with coverages and things like that. But Zach McNeese had 3 sacks. He had a great game. And, of course, Josh Lavacek is always there, and Owen Faby. And we have a sophomore in there with those seniors, and that's Nathan Smith. He did a great job. And then we bring in some guys that really you rotate defensive linemen. We brought in Matt Hansen. Not Matt. Yeah, Matt Hansen, okay. We have 2 Hansens, that's what I said. Matt Hansen, and we bring in Alex Jackson, and both those are sophomores, and they have a lot of energy, and they really bring a lot to the defensive line. So, and then our linebackers did a great job. You know, you got John Gavin running downhill, and Sam Schott, and then Frank Roti. And Frank had a great game. He had over 10 tackles, 11 tackles, which is one of our, goals for our players to get over 10 tackles. And so I thought we controlled things up front and put some pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, and that pressure is only going to increase naturally when you're able to get an early lead. And Colin Elledge getting lost behind the Carthage secondary and that opening drive was a great way to start the ball game. I mean, I looked up and I don't think there was anyone within 12, 15 yards of Colin when he caught that ball and had an easy 20-yard run in for a 41-yard touchdown catch.
You know, we designed our offense to get the ball to different people. I mean, I don't think you design the offense just for one person to catch the ball. And Colin is having a great year. I mean, he's got to be one of the leading tight ends in our conference right now, just by how we're using him a little bit and how he's making some plays for us. But it was nice to get that score real quick, and then put another 7 points on and get that 14-0 lead. Gives the defense something to play for. We always say that. You know, we say 2 things. To the defense, we say if they don't score, we can't lose. And then, we tell our offense is put some points to the board, so give the defense something to play for. So we're doing a good job with that in our first 2 ball games, and we got to continue this week against WashU.
Yeah, and you talk about wanting to spread the ball around a lot on offense. Certainly got plenty of playmakers in the receivers. Tight ends room, first touchdown catch for Marcus Marshall as well. And then Dermot Smythe, he didn't have to do too much with his arm with the early lead, 11 for 21, 144 yards and 2 touchdowns. But As we talk about spreading the ball around in the air, the same has been true on the ground in the first few weeks. You've got Jahari Scott and Danny Kent, who have largely been special teams players for the last 2 years, both playing big roles on the ground in the early going. And then Dermott, of course, doing it with his legs, too. I mean, you've got, the carries split, Smythe 14, Scott 10, Kent 12 on Saturday, and all were really effective. We'll talk to Danny in a couple minutes. He's sitting right over here next to you, but what did you see out of the ground game?
Yeah, we're very fortunate to have a real deep running back room. The other person you want to mention is Mel Woodson. He's a senior running back, and every running back that we have, whether it's Jahari or Danny or Mel, they have different styles, and so they've all been really great as far as when they go in there, they bring something to the team. Danny had a great run. I mean, it was an inside zone, and he keeps working pretty hard and breaks it out, and it was a 60-yarder and got hauled down from behind a little bit. We kind of kid him about that, but it was a great run, and he's doing a great job. He probably reads blocks better than the other two running backs, but then Jahari has great outside speed, and Mill has that wiggle, that lateral movement. So they all bring something to the table. And then you got Dermott, who is very elusive and is a playmaker with his legs. And, we didn't throw the ball as well as we wanted to. I thought we left some points out there. And so Dermott would be the first one to tell you that, he didn't have the game he wanted as far as throwing the ball and going through the progressions and things like that. But he's very capable, and I'm not concerned about that, and we have some great receivers too.
Yeah. So as we look ahead to this week, a second straight home game at Tucci Stadium, imagine that. And, of course, it is homecoming weekend. So far looks like a beautiful Saturday with Wash U coming in. Any particular plans? Obviously, it was a little more ceremonial home opener than usual with the dedication of the video board. And then some of the halftime ceremonies, of course, focused on various other teams and alumni coming back. But anything in particular you're really looking forward to?
Well, the first thing I want to mention is right now, there's 3 teams undefeated in the CCIW, and that would be us, North Central, and Wheaton. And, we want to stay there. I mean, you got to get in the win column, and we told our players that 2 weeks ago when we played Elmhurst. And every week you got to go out and have that as your goal. And WashU just suffered their first loss against North Central. And so they're coming off a road loss, and they have to come up and play at Tucci. So I think that's an advantage for us a little bit. But homecoming is a great game. Coaches, it's a love-hate thing. You love homecoming because it's a great environment, and there's a lot of former players that come back, and it'll be one of the biggest venues our players play in. And I told them that yesterday. And so it's a great atmosphere, and you want to reward, your fans and your alumni. At the same time, there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's distractions and things like that. So the players have to have a lot of self-discipline and make sure they focus on the game, because no matter what you say, the homecoming game is the focal point of homecoming. I mean, everybody's going to go there and get connected, and that's why it's a great venue to play in.
Absolutely. Looking forward to seeing you and the Titans in action this weekend. Of course, this is one where the start time and the venue is very hard to miss. You'll see it all week and all sorts of communications from the university and the athletic department, but 1 p.m. kickoff against the Bears on Saturday. Good luck, Coach. We'll see you there.
Should be a great game, and they're a really good football team. It'll be the best football team that we've played all year, and so we got to make sure that we're ready and excited and play with passion, but also, everyone has to do their jobs too.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. We'll be back in just a couple minutes with 2 of those guys who will get to do their jobs again at the homecoming game on Saturday. That'll be Frank Roti and Danny Kent.
Thank you.
And welcome back once again. We're going to follow up a great interview with Coach Eash with two of his players, junior running back Danny Kent, senior linebacker and captain Frank Roti. Gentlemen, congratulations on a 2-0 start in CCIW play, a great shutout victory against Carthage on Saturday. We just talked a little bit about that game with Coach Eash, of course, but I wanted to follow up with just a couple more questions from the players' perspective. And I want to start with the big addition, of course, to Tucci Stadium this fall, the new video board. And a huge thank you, of course, to all the donors, both those who were able to be there on Saturday and both who we may not see until this weekend for homecoming or later on down the line. But it does make a huge difference, even just in those, I think Katie Gonzalez and her staff had a day and a half to work on it and test it out and get to know how it works. And we'll only be able to add to that as it goes. So what was your thought between, the introductions and the game day experience and everything on how the new video board, the new scoreboard affected the game day?
Yeah, no, it really shows how deep our connections go with our alumni and how much they care about our school and program. It was cool seeing Byron Tucci. I've never personally got to see him before, and I've heard a lot about him. Tucci Stadium, for one, is named after him. It was just really cool being able to honor him pre-game for his contributions to our school. So it really shows how much people care about our football team.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. I didn't really know what to expect with just as far as would be putting on the actual scoreboard. I thought it was cool at halftime when they had the stats up there, especially because the game was going in our favor. Seeing the 4 rush yards at halftime was pretty interesting. And I think also just for the future Titans that want to come in, seeing that scoreboard is a really cool thing that you can look forward to.
Yeah, it is. You get so many elements of a big-time Division III football school here just when you come and see it on game day as a high schooler, junior, or senior. You've got the crowds. You've got a program that's been historically very competitive for a very long time, a sport that tends to draw high numbers. It's not hard to look around the country at Division III football schools and see schools that bring 150 fans to every game. The only reason that would ever be the case here is if it was 12 degrees and sleeting. It is a great game day crowd every time, but it does add a lot. You think back to when you were a junior or senior trying to figure out where you wanted to go, where you wanted to play, being able to come in and see a game like that, but also see a 35-0 shutout victory. So we're going to start with the defense, and Frank, 11 tackles and a sack on Saturday afternoon. Obviously, coming in against an offense that has struggled, but again, it's a CCW offense. It's a league where you have to be ready to bring it every single week, and there's a lot of tough teams. What was your game plan like to face the Carthage offense on Saturday?
Really, it just came down to all 11 defenders doing their job. Coach Williamson puts us in the right position to make the plays, and we did a lot of that on Saturday, and you can see with the shutout we got, all 11 guys went out there, played their hardest, and it showed on the final scoreboard when we shut them out.
Yeah. And talk about playing your hardest. I think my favorite play of the game was should have been a 4-yard run turned into a 60-yard run by Danny Kent, who's sitting right here with us. So I was watching the game from right up next to the press box, basically, kind of the bird's eye view. And all you see is, you kind of do. It was almost a little bit of a rugby scrum right there. I had no idea where you were in the middle of that, and you figure 5-6 yard gain, whatever. And then all of a sudden, it was almost like it was like the episode of The Office where Michael Scott's pretending that he's got the stairs down to the warehouse in the office, and you just see him emerge from the carpet in the middle of nowhere and take off. And the excitement of the crowd right there when they see you emerge from 5-6 Carthage defenders right there and take off. How'd you manage to break 6 tackles at once and turn that into a 60-yard gain?
Yeah, honestly, it was kind of a blur. I was just, I felt like I was wrapped up, but I was just, trying to fall forward and just keep my feet moving. And then I think I felt one of my linemen came in and was just pushing the pile, and then, all of a sudden it was kind of just green grass in front of me, and, I was hoping I didn't get hawked down, but, I looked kind of slow on the film. But it was good to get a good play like that.
To be fair, you did have to fight through, 6 260-pound guys to get there, so that'll do a number on the legs right at the beginning. Yeah, I kind of had the feeling, because all he's got to do is dive for your ankles there at some point when he gets close, that it was going to be, a 10, 15-yard line type deal. But then, especially being able to get the ball back and being able to be the one to put the ball in the end zone 2-3 plays later, something like that, speaks a lot of confidence in you from the coaching staff and trying to reward the player who made the biggest play on the drive by far.
Yep.
So in terms of your role, in the offense this year as a junior, obviously you've played a little on special teams, some kick return work. I had 6 carries, 3 receptions last year, but really the last 2 weeks have gotten a chance to show what you got a lot more with the lights on at Elmhurst and the 6 p.m. start last week. 6 carries for 37 and a touchdown, and then of course this week 12 carries for 103 and 2 touchdowns. How exciting has that been for you to actually be able to get out there after 2.5 years of practice and special teams and be able to be a big focal point of the offense?
Yeah, it's been really fun. Like you said, only really making an impact on special teams where I could. I thought last year maybe I was going to come out and start making some plays, and then it didn't really end up working out. I got hurt, and it's just been really nice, get out in the field and start making plays this year, and earning the trust of the coaches to put me out there. And I always say, I kind of get nervous before the first play, and then I finally get hit, and then it's been just nice to get into a groove and be able to start running behind our O-line.
Yeah, and to know that your impact isn't going to be limited to 1 or 2 carries, and you hope you can do the best with that, and you're actually going to get a chance to go out there a little bit more is nice. Frank, of course, coming a little bit of a different role the last couple of years. But as you're now a captain on a defense that has really, grown from being a very, very young group 2-3 years ago, as we've talked about with Coach Eash, a couple times over the last couple of years. What's it been like for you to grow from a freshman who played a decent amount to a sophomore full-time starter to now a senior captain of a group that has really actually gotten to play together for a lot longer than your average, collegiate defensive unit has?
Yeah, one big thing is maturity. I feel like I've matured a lot since my freshman year, and becoming more of a leader and having a leadership role really helped me out. I have to be reliant on all 10 guys on the field, and they have to be reliant on me, and it comes down to trust. I know and I trust all the 10 other guys on the defense that they're going to go out there and do their job, and they can trust me because they know I'm going to do my job on the field. And coming with such a close group, because we have been out there with the same starters for mainly the last 3 years, and it really shows how much team chemistry we have, and we've grown together as a unit, and it's good to see it's producing out on the field this year.
Yeah, and it's something you just don't get a lot in college football. I mean, especially you look at the physical difference alone between an 18-year-old and a 22-year-old. You don't get a chance to play a lot with a lot of the same guys over 4 years, and it's, it's the little bit of a curse in a way of having so many graduates and having such a young defense 3 years ago, but the payoff now is really fun. So before we go, I want to talk to you guys now as a junior and a senior as you start to look back on 2.5, 3.5 years of college, whether it's football, whether it's anything else. Any particular memories that stand out as kind of, favorite moments from your time at Wesleyan so far?
Honestly, probably just my first start as a freshman. I think it was week 4 homecoming against Elmhurst. It was pretty cool being able to start on a homecoming game as a freshman in Tucci Stadium in front of all the fans and alumni we get to our games. Was just a really special moment for me.
Yeah, I think for me it would be my freshman year homecoming against Carroll. We were down 21-0, I think, in that game, and we had a receiver, Charlie Hamilton, who was, just out of this world, and I think we just threw up a couple balls at him, and he went and made some plays. We ended up winning that game, I think, 26-21, and it was just really cool. I didn't play a whole lot, but it was fun.
Yeah, that was the dramatic second-half comeback against the Pioneers. That was a lot of fun, for sure. I got to give you props. We are filming this the Monday after the baseball season ended, as we were talking about earlier. The guts to walk in here with the White Sox shirt on, I respect it. I do.
Thank you.
And Bob Quillman watching in Texas, I'm sure will have something to say about that, be my guess. But know that 121 losses, it's a tough thing to watch. I'm sorry. I hope for better next year.
Yeah, same.
It's really it's a difficult thing to have to put up with, I think. Yeah,
it is.
Well, gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Once again, 1 p.m. kickoff this Saturday for homecoming weekend. We'll be back in just a few moments with Tony Bankston and then Kim Nelson-Brown.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back inside the podcast studio. Our next guest this afternoon, as we mix up the order a little bit from what we told you earlier, will be Kim Nelson-Brown from women's volleyball. Kim, 7 matches in 11 days, and then all of a sudden just one over the last 10 days, almost a little bit of a break in the game schedule mid-season to go back and get some stuff down in practice. Just had the one CCW road game against Elmhurst last week, and before we talk about that game, what's it been like for you to have this kind of weird, not an off stretch because you're out on the court a lot, but...
Right. You know, NCAA gave us an additional week last year, and so we just kind of spread out our schedule a little bit and just tried to balance it a little bit more so we weren't on the road as much. But also knowing when our players kind of hit that mid-stride wall. And I think we were coming into it a little bit just from a physical standpoint, a little banged up, a little bit of just overuse stuff from going hard for about 6 weeks with preseason. So it really came at a great time. And actually a lot of them were getting colds. And so this weekend they were just chilling and relaxing. And I think we all needed an off weekend. I think we were all at that point. So I really think it came at a good time.
Yeah, and when you look at the upcoming schedule, too, got a little bit of downtime from traveling constantly before you hit probably the toughest stretch of conference play of the season. Coming up, of course, this week, it'll be 15th ranked North Park coming in Wednesday at 6 p.m., 11th ranked Milikin on Friday at 7 p.m., and then that following Wednesday facing Carthage. Three of, really kind of the other three of the top 4 teams in the conference as predicted coming into play. You never know how it's going to shake out. There's some other teams that can definitely disturb that a little bit. But 3 really big conference matches coming up, and key is all at the Shirk Center. All
at the Shirk Center, which is beautiful to have all of them home and to fall all in line that we're here. And so we're excited to be at home and playing in front of our home crowd.
Yeah, North Park coming off a split at the September 20th try. They beat Aurora. They lost to 19th ranked Calvin and then fell up at 4th ranked Hope. So as their program's gotten a lot better over these last couple of years, you've really seen them, stretch their strength of schedule quite a bit, really in the same way that we tend to do.
Yeah, Mike's the head coach there, and he's done a nice job of really trying to play the top teams. I remember when he came in and Adriana was a freshman, so he was like, how do we get into the top 25? I'm like, you've got to play a stronger schedule, and he went out and did that, and I think that's helped them from just their competition level in the sense of who they're seeing on a daily basis. They're seeing the best of the best, and so it helps raise the level of play within your program, and I think he's benefited from that a lot.
Yeah, it was a great a 5-setter last year. The Vikings just topped the Titans 15-12 in that 5th set last year at
You
Shirk.
had to remind me. Thank you.
And then 3-1 in the CCW semis, but a team that really, wasn't a factor a couple of years ago and now very much is, and getting to see them at home 2 years in a row is a weird little twist, but it's nice.
It's great because we went to them for like 4 years in a row because of COVID and everything else, and so to have the last year and this year at our place, it's huge because their environment is tough to play in too, and so we had a great crowd last year. I hope this week's Hawaiian theme and tropical smoothies will entice people to come out and fill the stands and make it exciting.
$5 smoothies from Tropical Smoothie Cafe for the Wednesday match, of course. And then Friday, of course, Milikin bring a 17-2 record, national ranking into the Shirk Center. But that one, no matter where over the last, 6-7 years, either of those teams has been ranked, that one's always an exciting match. And, of course, homecoming with a lot of alumni coming back. Aside from the Milikin game, other festivities, other things planned for homecoming weekend?
For us, we try to take that as just to enjoy homecoming and being on campus for that. And so we play Friday night against Milikin, and then on Saturday, the women's volleyball will be having a tailgate out in the Shirk parking lot. So we're encouraging all our alumni to come by and say hi. And for the alumni who haven't been back, we have a wall that we actually sign in the arena. And so we'd love for our alumni who haven't been a part of that to do that too.
Very nice. So to backtrack a second and to talk about that one CCIW match last week, the conference road opener up at Elmhurst, a 3-0 win really, got off to a pretty smooth start in that first set, up 12-4, and forced Elmhurst, I believe, to use both of their timeouts in the first 16 or so points of the first set. a little bumpier in the second and third, trailed 17-12 in the second, but came back to win that one with a nice run. And then third one was close until an 8-1 run took you to a 25-16 victory there. Hitting .244 held Elmhurst to .067. 10 kills for Taylor, 6 for Morgan, 5 for Eleanor. I think hit .556 from the middle. 4 aces for Alex Bardenitis. What did you see out of the first conference road test there?
Elmhurst is always a tough place to play, and so for us to get out and take that lead in the first set was huge. I think for the past several years, it's been very easy to know that out of system we're going to go to Taylor French, whether she's in the front row or she's in the back row. This year we have a lot more of options, and our middles are coming to life, our right sides are coming to life. We've got Alex and Frenchie on the outside. So they've done our setters have done a really good job of dispersing the ball. And so I don't feel like we're as predictable, and I think for some teams it's a little bit different. And so really pleased with that. Obviously in the second set, we were battling our way back when men's soccer decided to take a detour from Lake Forest after their win up at Lake Forest and started cheering us on. And let me tell you, the noise in the arena and just was incredible, and extremely grateful for our men's soccer program and Coach Kyle Shawls to stop by and participate and help us out.
I knew they were there. I didn't know what time they'd gotten there, so that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Right at the end of the second set when we were trying to make our push, and the volume in that gym just went off really high. And actually, Elmhurst had a decent crowd, and they just weren't really into it. And when our guys came in and elevated the noise level, they started to counter, and it was a lot of fun. It was a great college atmosphere, and so kudos to our men's team. We were really thankful.
Yeah. It's not often that stuff works out. Like even when two different teams are up in the Chicago area at the same time, a lot of times it's, 1 or 2 p.m. starts on a Saturday or 7 p.m. starts on a weekday, and you're playing at the same time, but with that early start.
Right.
It's good stuff. It's fun.
That's fun.
So you talk about, the setters doing a really nice job being able to spread the ball around a little bit, but same thing works for the setter position, but spreading those touches around quite a bit too. Jordan Pierce, the second half of last year, obviously got a vast majority of the run, running a 5-1 a lot of that times. But really, Sophie Feeney, Abby Erdman, Jordan splitting time quite a bit, with Jordan doing some hitting on the right side too. What is your kind of approach now that you've seen this for over 14 matches, approach to the setter position?
It comes down to every day, right? And I think all three of them are vying for that position, and I think all three of them can do a great job with it. And so it really gives us some options. Jordan's been hitting for us, and so if her hitting's on, it's been easy just to keep her in there. But I think all three of them contribute in such a way and have different strengths and weaknesses, but we feel confident in all three of them going in there, and it's allowed us to kind of have some different options. Jordan can run a 5-1. If we're stuck in a serve-receive rotation and she's in the front row, she can go ahead and set. And gives us a different look really quick without doing anything else, without changing the sub. So it allows us to have a little bit more flexibility, and we've been really pleased with all three of them.
I was trying to think back in the 14, 15 years that I've been able to watch a lot of your team as to how many setters can kind of just go back and forth between setting and hitting. And Maddie Corey used that way a little bit, maybe junior, senior year or something like that. There weren't a lot of other names coming to mind necessarily.
No, and I think back over my career, and that's 29 years here right now, really Jordan and Maddie were probably the two legit setter hitters combo. We've had Tiffany Hamblin in the past, and she was a phenomenal setter, but we used her to run a 5-1. She didn't hit that often, but she was a threat in the front row, but more from a setter. I mean, she could keep you on her toes as even though she wasn't technically hitting, but just her court sense was unbelievable. But otherwise, most of the time it was a 5-1, a true 5-1, where I feel like both of them gave us the option for a 5-1 or a 6-2.
Yeah. And so it's nice to have those options in match to conserve timeouts, if nothing else, and to give the opponent a different look every once in a while
exactly.
too.
Exactly.
Not to mention covering injury or off day or anything.
Yeah.
Not that we're not gonna speak that into existence or anything. But that does lead into a little bit I want to talk about on the back line too. With it's dominated by Cannon Boyd in the early going, and then Alyssa Lawton getting a little bit of a chance to show what she can do in her first year when Cannon was out for a little bit. And and how much fun was that to see?
I feel like our position, typically our setter position is not one of depth, and this year we have a lot of depth. Our DS position has been typically one of depth, and this year we haven't had that. Unfortunately, Reagan's out with an injury and probably will not see the court the rest of the year. And so when Cannon went down, it was Hallie and Alyssa, and both of them doing a great job. And so just trying to figure out who's going to go in, and kind of gave them both an opportunity. And Alyssa just kind of stepped up, and so we went with Alyssa, and she did great. I mean, she was averaging almost, I think, 6 digs per set coming off of the Cornell weekend. And then we got a second opinion with Cannon, and she was able to play. And so it was kind of one of those things as a coaching staff, a good problem to have. Just unfortunate because they were both doing so well, and so trying to figure that out. But we've kind of found a way to still use Alyssa in some capacity, and Hallie's been doing a great job too. So we have a lot of good options right now, and it's hard because their position is truly just the back row, and we only have 15 subs. So, trying to pick and choose, and especially if we're running a 6-2, it really limits how much we can get them in, but all of them are doing a great job, and we're ready to put them in at any point.
Yeah, it's funny. You've got 3 players like that who can play the DS spot, play the libero spot, and produce some highlight reel digs in the back row. I mean, I think back to that first home tournament when Hallie kept a couple points alive.
Huge.
I mean, going straight away from the net toward the back line and keeping some balls up that I thought there was no chance.
Right.
And then getting to see Alyssa play a little bit more in the last couple of weeks. I mean, there's more depth there, as you said, than usual. It's a great thing to have.
We talk about a dig or die mentality, and all 3 of them have that mentality, which, again, a good problem as a coaching staff, tough problem as a coaching staff too. So,
yeah.
But we're very pleased with all 3 of them.
Yeah. Well, if you want to catch the Titans at home, all of a sudden you've got some great chances to do so here in the next week. Once again, Wednesday is a 6 p.m. start. Wednesday, 6 p.m. against North Park, $5 tropical smoothie night, Tropical Smoothie Cafe. Wear your beach attire if you want. It's still slightly vaguely end of summery weather here, so you can kind of pull it off. Friday, of course, 7 p.m. against Milikin, and then once again that next Wednesday, the 9th, I believe
Correct.
it is Carthage at home. So come on out, cheer on your Titans, pack shirk this Wednesday and Friday.
We love it.
Oh, yeah. Good luck,
you.
Coach. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I think it was one of my first few classes I realized, I like this. And then I was like, I got some tests back and I did well on them, and I was like, I'm good at this. I went from high school 10 years ago, almost flunking out, almost dropping out, to being on the dean's list. If I have the support that I need, I can accomplish things and do things that I was never expecting to be able to do. I think so fondly of my experience here so far.
And once again, welcome back. Our final guest of the day here in Week 5 of Titan Table Talk is Associate Athletic Director who has worn many hats here at the Shirk Center, on campus, at the Welcome Center throughout the years, Tony Bankston. Welcome, Tony.
Hello, Tommy. Good to be here with you.
So we're gonna take you on a journey way back in time to the early 90s, and this is in advance of the celebration of the 30th anniversary.
I took medication to help me with my memory today, so just to prepare for this interview.
Did it work?
Well, we're going to find out.
What time was the interview going to start?
Well, I've already forgotten that, so we're not off to a good start.
We are not. Medication didn't kick in until about 2:15.
Yeah, well, it's hit or miss. I mean, really, it's a coin flip. So
it happens.
Yeah,
you know,
more Prevagen for me.
They do have the guy from Bloomington on the Prevagen commercials.
I know.
Right?
Yeah, claim to fame. How about it?
I think we need to get you possibly on that train.
Yeah, I needed some. It could be like a clinical trial, whatever. If somebody's got something out
I think
there.
if you're walking around having to tell people that you're participating in a clinical trial, I think they're going to have a lot of questions about what it's for.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of options.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I don't forget.
Were we doing an interview, or were we going to do something?
I don't even know why I'm here. I can't remember that.
I don't know either. So back to the early 90s. Right?
Yes.
So you graduated from Wesleyan in 91.
That is correct.
Started in admissions in July of 1992.
I left for a year. I always like to tell people, because a lot of people working at Wesleyan, did you start right after you graduated?
Kind of.
Yeah.
So I had the year in there where I was student teaching for a year and then working over at Normal West. So I was kind of gone, but not
I like to point out the difference between those of us who could go out and find employment and chose to come back versus those who, out of pity, the university has to hire right after they graduate. So I did leave, yes, for a year and worked in business communications in St. Louis, and then came back in June of '92.
And then 2 years later, you found yourself being the first ever head coach of the women's soccer team, in addition to starting that year as the men's soccer head coach. That's what we'll be celebrating the 30th year anniversary of, is the beginning of the women's soccer program this weekend at homecoming. I think you've got 10 or 11 of your former players coming back. Is that correct?
Yeah. So what I decided to do is I coached both the men and women. I was head coach for 6 years for both programs. And so we wanted to do something for that 1994 women's team. But, back then, having one head coach who barely knew what he was doing, we did a lot of things together. So we traveled a lot of times. All of our weekend games were, we had both the men's and women's team on the bus together, and the practices would overlap sometimes just to make things work. And they were really a close-knit group. So in order to kind of bolster numbers and make it kind of a fun celebration, I invited all of the players that I coached during my 6-year tenure for both the men and the women. And so we're kind of making it a fun reunion of the teams from those years, from 94 to 99, but also celebrating the 30-year anniversary of that very first women's program in 1994.
And obviously, as you look back on it, is no coaching experience a fair way to put
More
that
than
coming
fair.
into that job?
Yeah. I've told this story numerous times, but Denny Bridges was the athletic director at the time. I had played soccer on the men's team at Illinois Wesleyan, so Denny knew me as a student athlete, and then I had been involved with the athletic department after working in admissions. I'd run the shot clock at basketball games, do some of the PA or the play clock for football, and so I guess I was a known entity to Denny. And my coach had been a gentleman named John Anderson, and he had tendered his resignation, decided he was going to pursue other things. So Denny calls me into his office and says, would you like to be the new men's soccer coach? And I said, that's a terrible idea. I go, I was 24 years old at the time. The seniors were 22-year-olds that I had played with, 21, 22-year-olds. I had never coached any sport at any level. And so we get into this back and forth of him trying to talk me into the job and me trying to talk him out of hiring me. I'm like, this is a terrible idea. I don't know why you would. And Denny was a very successful coach because he was a great recruiter, and he started to, pun intended, put the full court press on me. And he said, oh, no, he goes, you were a really good player. You really understand the game. You're a great recruiter. You've been working in admissions. He goes, just get off the van with the best 11 players. You'll be surprised how good a coach you can be. At which I was shocked that he knew there were 11 players on a soccer field. Yeah. So he had at least been paying attention. We literally go back and forth for like 30 minutes. I'm like, I still, how would that work? I'm working full time in admissions, and him knocking every argument down. So finally I'm like, all right, coach. I go, I guess I'll give it a try. And I literally get up to walk out of his office, and he goes, and by the way, he goes, I need you to start a women's program too. So I walked in thinking I was unqualified to coach one team, and I walked out the head coach of two teams needing to start one as an NCAA sport. There had been a loose women's soccer club for at least a year or two, so I had at least a little bit of a base to go to. But I look back on that story and that day, and it's actually a bit of advice I give to people, is now I'm this old man, and people say, tricks of the trade. But I said, well, don't be afraid of doing something sometimes that you might think is significantly greater than what you're capable of doing. And that was one of those instances when I'm like, I can't believe I said yes. And then I can't believe I made it through 6 years, Part of it was imposter syndrome. I'm like, when are the student athletes going to figure out, whether or not I'm actually a qualified coach? But I went to a clinic up in Notre Dame at the University of Notre Dame. Head coach up there at the time was Mike Berticelli. His assistant coach was a well-known soccer guy named Mike Parsons. They put on like a clinic where they taught a little bit how to structure your practice sessions. This is the only thing I ever went to that gave me an idea of that. And that's pretty much how it started. That was the impetus of my coaching career.
And when you look back on starting that women's program, obviously, if you go back a decade, you have lacrosse, then you have men's volleyball, bowling, among others, wrestling coming back. So you've seen quite a few programs start over the last 10 years that you've been back down in athletics full time, but a very different animal starting a program in 1994 than it is in the current landscape of college athletics, probably easier in some ways, harder in some ways. What are the big differences you see, like if you were, starting a program now versus what you were doing to start it in 94?
Well, I think probably communication would be one of the big ones. There's certainly, women's soccer and girls' youth soccer had been on the rise for a while. So I think there was an ample pool, of players, which is why a lot of colleges were adding it. But there was no, I'm old enough that email and the internet came about after I had already started working at Illinois Wesleyan University. So a lot of it was still going to tournaments and picking up the phone and mailing this thing called a letter, with a stamp on it. And so I think in some ways generating numbers, large enough numbers to support a program and to feed a program was a little bit more of a challenge back then. I think you have even obviously larger numbers playing, for instance, women's soccer these days, but you also have this technological reach that allows you to kind of get the word out a little bit more. I do tell people that our women's program, I think, achieved success. I look back at the records, that first year, the women went, I think, 8-9-1. And my senior year at Wesleyan, I think we were something like 3-15. We were not good. The men's soccer team at Wesleyan had never finished over 500 until the second year I coached was the first year. Actually, I think might have been year one. We went 9-8, and that was a big deal for a lot of those seniors that year to experience that, and for veterans that had been on the team. But the men's program started up maybe 30 years. There were colleges playing men's soccer in the 50s and 60s, and our men's soccer program didn't start till like 1986. The women's program was only about, maybe real established programs. Wheaton College was the real powerhouse. They were top 10 programs in both men and women's soccer. And even at Wheaton, they'd only been playing women's soccer for about 15 years or so. So when we started the Illinois Wesleyan program, a lot of colleges were just dipping their toes in the water and starting a program. And that made it easier to compete right away. And if you were successful in recruiting and putting together a good squad, you could have some success. And so early on, those women's teams were significantly more competitive. But part of that was just based on them, being a little later to the game, but not super late to the game.
Yeah. And it's funny to think about if you're in college now. It feels like women's soccer has been a long established sport like anything else, being around for 30 years here now, and with the sheer volume of success we've had at Wesleyan. And to think that a good chunk of our staff was here when there were 6 people in the department full time, and you had a lot of part-time coaches coming from other places. I think it's a lot of things that our athletes today don't necessarily think about or realize is the case. But hopefully, it's the celebrations of stuff like this at homecoming that can kind of bring that and a little bit of that appreciation of, okay, where we came from not really that long ago, because you're only 31 or 32 years old. Is that right? Something like that?
Yeah, you just keep saying that.
Yeah, we'll go with that. And, we came from not that long ago, and the resources and just the volume of people that they have at their disposal
you're
now.
wearing the T-shirt from our celebration of 50 years of Title IX at Illinois Wesleyan, and I'll be honest with you, when I here I am, I started a women's program at Illinois Wesleyan. I had no idea what Title IX was back then. I don't remember anybody talking about it. Nobody had talked to me about it. I remember with our men's soccer team, they were upset that they felt like people on campus didn't even know we had a men's soccer team, much less starting a women's soccer team. And so some of it was legitimizing. Illinois Wesleyan had a lot of athletic success. There were certainly the cornerstone programs of baseball, men's basketball, and football, where we had more CCIW championships than any other school in the conference. And those had been here for a long time and had achieved a lot of success. And so it was even an era, where there was a feeling of lesser than for a lot of a lot of athletes as well. And it was, and a lot of part-time coaches. So all of the soccer coaches for the men's team, which was an established, NCAA team that had started back in 1986, had always been a part-time individual before I was hired. And I was still working full-time in admissions. I tell people this is nuts, but I would get up at 6 a.m. in the morning. I would drive 2 hours to my recruiting territory for the admissions office. I'd visit 3 or 4 high schools. I'd talk to kids, tell them about Illinois Wesleyan. I'd drive 2 hours back to campus, get here about 3:30, 4 o'clock, and I'd run 4 hours of varsity practices. Yeah. And did that for 6 years, which is bananas, but I had a lot more energy, thank God, back then. If a student athlete had an issue with a coach and you were a soccer player, you couldn't even find, your coach wasn't on campus. The only time you saw your coach was the 2 hours that you had at practice, and then they were working at State Farm or they were working at somewhere else in town. So it was even a big leap just to kind of have a full-time person on campus that in between classes or if something came up, people could stop by. They knew that I was in the admissions office. I remember when I gave up coaching after 6 years, my recommendation was, listen, this needs to be a full-time job. I don't know, I've been working 3 jobs if you want this to keep improving. And so the next iteration was a full-time coach that came in and coached both the men and women, but they were just a full-time coach at Illinois Wesleyan. And it's evolved to the point now where we have separate full-time coaches and full-time assistants, for many of our programs, including men's and women's soccer. So, I don't think a student athlete today, I tell this ridiculous story about how underqualified I was, and that we were like putting an airplane together with duct tape and chewing gum, but it kind of felt like building the plane while you were flying it, if you've ever heard that analogy before, that I was just trying to figure out how to make it feel like a legitimized sport, that the student athletes had the support that they wanted, that they felt that we could be competitive and not just kind of have a team, but be a successful team. The second year with the men's program, we went 12-6, 5-1 in the CCIW, after being a perennial doormat. And part of that was just belief and consistency. And so I kind of had a bigger... for me, bigger picture was kind of legitimizing the sports, right? Not just getting them going, but making them feel like they were really part of the athletic fabric at Illinois Wesleyan. And I probably take the most joy in that, that to see how they have grown, how they have built. The women's team has been to a Final Four. The men's team broke through and made their first NCAA tournament last year. Soccer in the CCIW is very difficult because it's not like, we've got a really weak conference and you can win the conference and go to the NCAA tournament. If you want to win the CCIW men's and women's soccer, you've almost got to be a top 10 team. Top 15 or 20 for sure, because those are the teams that are typically winning the conference. And so the bar is higher there than maybe some other sports where maybe most of the people within the conference are, more mid-table or upper mid-table or something like that. So to see how it's established today, looks like a big boy, big girl sport, is a lot of fun knowing how those early years went.
It definitely is, and look forward to inviting so many of those alums from the 90s, from your 6 years of coaching, back to campus this weekend, along with so many other guests who we'll have around. Really looking forward to all the festivities for sure. Once again, there's far too many things going on for me to go through a list of them for you here, but iwsports.com and all of the alumni and donor and friend of the university information you get, that'll have many, many schedules on there for homecoming weekend. And when in doubt, just pick up the phone at 11 p.m. and call Tony Bankston, and he'll
I answer the phone at any time. Yeah, yeah. This reunion's been a lot of fun. We're going to do some tailgating. I've got a few that are in town early. We're going to do a little happy hour on Friday night, and then we've got a tailgate from 11 to 1 on Saturday, right before the football game. And then we happen to just have had 2 soccer matches that day as well. So we flip-flopped the games because typically the women would have been playing at 1 and the men at 3:30. But we went ahead and flip-flopped that so that the women's team can be recognized at halftime of the football game, and then they'll be able to catch the full women's match at 3:30. But it's been fun to connect with so many players. Kay Gallion, still one of the top scorers in the history for Illinois Wesleyan. Great player for me during the 4 years that she was here. I hadn't talked to her since she graduated from Illinois Wesleyan in 98 or whenever that was. So the fact that she's coming back and we've reconnected through email. Some players I've seen off and on over the years, but I'm really looking forward to this weekend. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. So are we. We hope to see you all on campus, or at the very least watching the live streams to catch the many, many special events you'll have for homecoming this weekend. Thanks, as always, for joining us, Tony, and we'll see you around quite a bit this week.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks, Tommy.